This is Justice William Orville Douglas, and he wrote the opinion for the court in a case called Skinner versus Oklahoma ex rel. Williamson. This case was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1942, and it has to do with this question of whether or not an Oklahoma statute that allowed for sterilization after habitual offenses was a violation of the 14th Amendment. Mr. Skinner had been convicted 3 times of 3 different offenses. The first offense had occurred in 1926, and he had been convicted of stealing chickens. The subsequent 2 charges were robberies involving a weapon. After his 3rd charge and conviction, the jury decided to go forward with this statute in Oklahoma that said he could be sterilized. The machinery that was involved in sterilizing was provided by the Attorney General, and it was part of an option for sentencing when it came to a 3rd or a habitual offender. Now, this statute applied to men and women. Mr. Skinner was not very happy with this sentence, and he said it violated his 14th Amendment right. The way that this statute was written, it specified that this kind of a sentence could be given when we had multiple crimes amounting to felonies involving moral turpitude. But the question here was, did this statute violate his 14th Amendment right in that he had a right to go forth and continue on the human race? But this option would be taken from him, and it was his right to be able to have this as an option in his life. All the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court it went. If any of you remember, we have a previous case called Buck versus Bell, in which Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously said 3 generations of imbeciles is enough, and said that sterilizing a woman in a mental institute was absolutely fine. Now, Mr. Skinner argued that he didn't believe his offspring would be imbecilic, so he claimed he should have the right to be able to go forth and have children in the future if he wanted. Justice Douglas agreed, and he said, look, when it comes to perpetuating the human species, that's a fundamental right. And this statute hinders that fundamental right, and therefore it is a violation of the 14th Amendment. He also went on to say there is an irreversible nature of sterilization, and that was completely unacceptable. It went too far as for a punishment option that was on the table for these kinds of offenses. Lastly, he set out that compulsory sterilization laws should be subject to strict scrutiny, which of course we all know is a very high standard for the government to meet when it comes to writing out a law. He won his case, and the court held that this was a violation of the 14th Amendment for both men and women with how this statute was written. We do have one concurrence from Chief Justice Harlan Stone. Now, he agreed with the decision, but he said he would have argued it on due process grounds rather than this idea that it's a fundamental right. But there you have it, a very interesting case on whether or not a state can include a statute that involves sterilization as a sentencing option for habitual offenders.